talk about some of the progress that's been made and some of the challenges that remain. There's still an agenda that's out there, and a lot of people working very hard to extend those rights. And is very young, but has. And Pedro, as you know, Argentina has been, in some respects, at the forefront of this movement in the Americas. Was the first country in Latin America and had a lot of contact with political leaders on all sides of the spectrum in Argentina, which I think is unusual in itself. Very important story to tell us, and about his own experience, his own work, about Argentina.
Okay, thanks for your words. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank to the Dialogue for inviting me and for organizing this wonderful event and a partition think tank.
In Kingston or Georgetown, Guyana, because of the sodomy laws in the English-speaking Caribbean countries. And actually, probably, if this would have happened in the English-speaking Caribbean, unfortunately, probably we will not have you having you here with us today. So, and this is the sad reality in the Americas right now with the sodomy laws, especially in the English-speaking Caribbean. There are 14 countries right now that ban same-sex conduct in the English-speaking Caribbean and in the English-speaking Caribbean, and that represents a huge challenge for LGBTI activists. Argentinas have been seen as the beacon, so to speak, of the LGBTI movement in Latin America, along with the Brazilian movement. But unfortunately, hate crime still happen there, and this is something that actually, we need to take into account with the mainstream human rights organizations and the LGBTI organizations, because even in those countries where we have the laws, society still is behind. So we really need to work with the society at large in order to advance LGBTI rights. The other problem I think I would like to highlight in the Americas is that, unfortunately, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, is the fact that Buenos Aires is not Argentina, or Sao Paulo is not Brazil, or Rio de Janeiro is not Brazil. So I'm pretty sure what is happening in the countryside, if you're an LGBT person in Salta, especially Salta or Neuquén, probably is very different. Like for the LGBTI activists or couples living in the countryside. And so I'm glad to see this initiative from the Gobierno de Buenos Aires, because Buenos Aires I think is very important, but hopefully the other provinces will follow these steps. So what do we have to offer? And I'm not going to talk about what global rights does, because this is not about global rights. But I think we need to document human rights violations more. And I think what you guys are doing, I think is great to come forward. But also, we need to encourage the LGBTI groups and activists to document human rights violations. Why? Because then we need to change policies, and often, the excuse of the government is like, well, we don't have that many cases. Oh yeah, it was an isolated incident. But I'm pretty sure there are many cases that are not reported. So if they were reported, then we can do something about it. The other aspect I would like to highlight is the legal protection of activists and people who have victims of violence. A lot of times they don't report because they feel intimidated by the police, or they don't know how to do it. So I think it's important sometimes to offer accompaniment to victims of violence or hate crimes in those countries. The other thing that I would like to mention is that we need to engage the mainstream human rights organizations working on LGBT issues. And this is what we have been doing in Colombia, in Peru, in Brazil. Why? Because they're already well-established NGOs in our countries. They're working on human rights in general. So it's time for them to start working on LGBTI rights. I mean, LGBTI rights are human rights, and it sounds like a cliche, but a lot of NGOs in Latin America, in the English-speaking Caribbean, it's clear, they don't consider LGBTI rights as human rights. So we need to engage them because they already have some of them the credibility. And I just want to I would like to mention a very brief example. In Peru, there is the Coordinadora Nacional de Derechos Humanos, the main umbrella network of organizations working on human rights. And it's, I hope that there isn't a Catholic person here, but it's the Catholic Church influenced a lot the work of
Sometimes
the...
I get into these.
They're infiltrated. No, anyways, the good thing is that the Catholic Church is the engine of this network in Peru. However, in the last 2 years, we have seen the Coordinadora starting to work more on LGBTI issues, especially on transgender issues, which is great. And the other thing that I would like to mention is then how can we do more advocacy at the national, regional, and international level? And based on our experience, and I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm a believer of the American human rights system. I think the human rights system is one of the best systems we have. I mean, it's the best system we have in the region to try to seek justice, because it's a reparatory system, and so the decisions of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights are binding, and the jurisprudence of the court applies for all the countries that have ratified the American Convention. So for instance, if we have a case against Argentina on LGBTI rights, the sentence or the jurisprudence can apply to any country of the Americas that have ratified the Inter-American Convention. So I think that's important because a lot of LGBTI groups still do not know that in the region. Well, even human rights groups do not know that in the region. So I think that will advance LGBTI rights. Why? Because it will force the governments to comply with the sentence, and it will kind of invite them, so to speak, invite them to change legislation at a national level. So how to domesticate the international norms. And I just would like to take a minute because I really think that there's been a debt by the LGBT movement towards the transgender movement in the Americas and in the world. I think the transgender movement is being part of the LGBT movement because there is another place where there can be sometimes, and they have been discriminated against a lot within even the LGBT movement. And I think, and I just want to mention this because I think it's great what you guys are doing, especially with the trans community, recognizing the needs of the transgender community, because I couldn't agree more with the problems that you were mentioning, because they apply all over the world, not only in Argentina. And I'm not just gonna, leave it like that. But yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to finalize with, since I'm a believer of the Inter-American human rights system, in July this year, the General Assembly of the Organization of American States approved a resolution that actually, or approved this Inter-American Convention on Discrimination and Related Forms of Intolerance in Guatemala. And they actually approved two conventions, the one on discrimination and related forms of intolerance, and another one on racism, racial discrimination, and related forms of intolerance. Why this is important? Because it's a new tool. It's the first tool that has been ratified in the Americas after 20 years. So it's a new inter-American instrument that we have. But the most important thing for the LGBTI movement is that includes clauses on discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So I think that's very important. And the other good thing is that Argentina signed that convention, both conventions actually. So now we need Argentina to ratify the convention. Argentina signed the convention along with Uruguay, that convention along with Uruguay and the one on discrimination and related forms of intolerance, and another country, I can remember which one right now, Ecuador, that was not the other country to ratify that specific convention. So now it's open for countries to sign the convention and then to ratify the convention. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and I would like to thank you for your courage. Actually, I think that actually opened the door for a lot of people in Argentina and elsewhere to come forward after being or after suffering an attack. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Carlos. I want you to talk about that a little bit. If you, what kind of?
You don't like lobbyists, but
I'd like you to talk about that. How you think, what effect will having an Argentine Pope have
Yeah.
in Argentina and, throughout Latin America. He's very, obviously, as we saw in his visit to Brazil, had enormous impact, was well received warmly. This is somebody who seems like he's a very politically very smart guy, could be very influential. How do you see it? That's one question. And the second question is also, you're with this Fundación, which is associated with the PRO, the more conservative party. Is this an issue in Argentine politics? For example, there's going to be elections, legislative elections next month.
Yeah.
Presidential elections. Are there differences between the
One proposal and
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Just tell us a little bit about it. How does this play out politically? This issue, as you see it, and you're on one end, and the other side is seen as very progressive and very open. And how do you see that relationship?
Okay. To the first question about the Pope, it's like after the day he was designed to be the Pope, our city was like if right now you go to Buenos Aires city, you will feel like you are in the Vatican City, because you will see more flags of the Vatican. It's like, I don't know, the American people have flags of their country around all the streets, and it's like there are flags every street. Okay, we have a lot of flags of the Vatican right now in our streets. About the LGBT work in relation with the Pope, with the Pope inauguration, I think that we can work. We are working right now, but maybe if this process was like 3 years ago, maybe we don't have equal marriage law right now in Argentina. So I'm very happy about the Pope, but in this year, not 3 years ago. Because I think that the church in my country has lost a lot of power in the last decades, but right now it's like they have the power again. But the Pope in Rio say some words that for the LGBT community, some people think that are good and some people think that are not so good, because he talked about the gay people, but he referred to the Catholic, to the Catholic book where we have all the rules about what is homosexuals people and what is the homosexual act, and it's not so good what say that book. But just a minute. But I think that he's an open mind person, and sometimes this is not so political what I was going to say, but sometimes you need to enter with a shirt. No sé cómo se dice en inglés. Sometimes it's like, okay, it's like, I think that the Pope, to get that church, had to say some things.
Sure.
And right now in the power, he's going to change, because a lot of people that form the church say some things about the women that are not so nice. And this Pope in Rio say that we have to give the importance to the woman and the respect that they deserve, no? And I think that's very important.
So I wanted to add that I think we must...
Carlos, you have to tell us who you are if you're going to interrupt like that.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Carlos Indacochea, GW. You have to make a distinction. These are the statements he made in the plane returning to Rome. He has said a number of very creative things and friendly things, but he hasn't deviated an inch from the doctrine. And the doctrine is pretty harsh. So yes, he said if somebody serves God, if he or she is gay, who am I to judge? And then again, what is condemned is the homosexual act and so on and so forth. I think that the most important thing he has said, and which is truly a novelty and we should work on, is that he endorses the separation of church and state and the lay state. And he said that there. Very few people have noticed, but that is what gives us room to have civil law, to have a national life that is independent from Catholic doctrine and should be private. It should be accepted by those in private, by those that accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, the Pope, and at that time he was like the Archbishop, of the Buenos Aires city, and he was against about the equal marriage law, but he was not against the civil union law. That's an important point. And about right now we have elections next month, about the LGBT issues and the proposals of the political parties. Right now they are not talking about the LGBT rights, because right now we are just fighting for the rights of the transgender people, and I think that this issue is not in the agenda of the politician proposals. But the FPV party, that is the official national party, the president's party, is like, they like to say all the time the equal marriage law is just their goal, and that's false, because it was like a goal about all the parties, because most of the parties vote favorable to that law, and they can believe that from PRO we are introducing a lot of modification, and we are making a big advancement on the rights of the transgender people. It's like last week, and I appear in the newspaper, like in La Nación, that it's an important newspaper, saying from PRO we are going to introduce a modification to reduce the 70% of the, and it was like a lot of people of FPV start to write me, oh, you're saying that from PRO? Yes, and we are going to introduce this law in the Congress. So it's like right now I think that the opposition to our party is like a little bit confused. But we like it, and it's like sometimes I think that the political proposals and the political proposals that came from the political leaders, it's because they don't have the information that they have to make the proposals. Because when we said with Mauricio Macri, that is the mayor of the city and is our political leader, it was like, okay, what happened with the transgender people right now in Argentina? And we say, okay, they have the expectation of life of 35 years, 99% works in prostitution, and 38% have contract HIV or AIDS. And he say, okay, I don't care if I am agree with my values or not. We are the government and we have to work to change the situation, because there are people that live in the city of Buenos Aires. And I think that this proposal of work that don't import, it's like, doesn't matter about your value, your religion values. It's like, we are the government, you have to work. So I think that his proposal for LGBT people is that if we someday we take the power around all the country, I think that he's going on this way. We have to work because we are the state, and the same happened with the civil union law. Mauricio Macri was have a political relationship with Francisco at the time, Jorge Bergoglio, and on the time that he had to accept the first marriage celebration in Buenos Aires, Mauricio filmed a video that put on YouTube, saying that he approved this act in the city of Buenos Aires, and it was a political cost. A very heavy political cost, because it was with the church relations.
Great, thank you. Why don't we get some questions? Yes, why don't we start with you?
Yeah,
Please just tell us who you are, and
my name is Shirley Fletcher.
yeah, the microphone. If you could please use the microphone.
Yeah, my name is Shirley Fletcher. I've done consulting work here in the U.S. over the last 30 years, and a lot of it on issues of homophobia, heterosexism. And I'm just so concerned about the situation in Jamaica. It seems to me that over my lifetime, very little has changed in terms of the depth of the homophobia. And one of the things that I wonder about is, I mean, and there's been so much progress in Argentina. And I wonder, from your perspective, what are some of the factors that makes Argentina different? You know, what is it? What is it about the culture of Argentina, the politics? I don't know. What is it that is making it possible for you to make such strides on this issue, right? And to just be in such a different position to places like countries like Jamaica, for example.
Thank you. Why don't we take a few other questions? And
Yes.
this will give you time to think about a good answer for that. That's a good question. Yes, please. Why don't we go ahead? You have a question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Douglas Janoff. I'm with the Canadian Mission to the OAS, and thank you so much for your presentation. Actually, it wasn't a question, it was just more comment on the presentation. First of all, Dr. Schifter's comment that Argentina is at the forefront of the Americas. I always have to remind everyone that Canada had same-sex marriage 12 years ago. We do have a lot of assistance for transsexual people who are looking for surgery because of our nationalized medical system. And there seems to be sometimes, anyway, we forget about that country to the north, which is the largest trading partner of the United States. And I get a bonus every time that I mention this one. But it was more, I really wanted to just congratulate you on your ability to link the transgender issues with the LGBT issues, and just feeding into the comment that Mr. Quesada was making about the difficulty of transgender issues being integrated through the Canadian experience. What we can
Right. And we'll go to you after Pedro.
Yeah, I want to say that when I speak about the online sexual and reproductive health counseling service that we are going to launch on October 11 from the city of Buenos Aires, I think that is an important thing about this webpage, that will help a lot of people that sometimes they don't know where to go to the news site, to the news. For example, violence, hate crimes, and we are launch a smartphone application because 98% of the young people in Buenos Aires have smartphones. So when we speak with the mayor of the city, he told us why don't put something in the smartphone for the people to know, for example, where to get condoms or where to go in a case of violence, hate crimes. So anota eso, sería muy interesante to put because online information where to go on this case, because in my case was like after the hospital, because I get like 10 hours unconsciousness. I went to the police station, but I was so afraid because I said, I will go to the police and the police is going to still with harassment and with discrimination. But when I arrived to the police station, the police who attended me was gay, so it was very, very good to me. But about how to get the resources so you can help on these issues, it depends about what the political party in the power wants to do, because the trans home, for example, and our idea is always to work with the private and the public all the time. We don't. I think that what we arrangement with ATA, this Association of Travesty and Transgender and people, is like, okay, we will give you the house, we will put in conditions, we will help you in some things, but we are not going to do all the work, because this has to be a work between the civil people, with the people, with the civil people, and with the government, and trying to find different resources from companies or from organizations. I don't know. And we're from South America, we have less money, really. And about
Why Argentina?
Why Argentina? Yeah, I think that there's a incredible book, but it's in Spanish, that it's Historia de la Homosexualidad en Argentina. It's incredible. I think that is the best book I ever read. I think that it's difficult, your answer, but for example, in Buenos Aires we don't have like a gay neighborhood. We just live there. It's like we don't have a gay street, we don't have a gay area, we don't have ghettos. Never we had it. Instead, the military and in the military dictatorship, the gay people don't have to go like to one side. And the immigration, a lot of immigration from France, from Spain, Italy, from different points from South America. I think that a lot of culture it's like there's a mix of cultures in Argentina, and we have like a lot of people that believe in the civil rights, and a lot of politicians that I think that they believe in the in the LGBT demands, and they work on these issues. But I think that after the economic crisis in 2001, we suffer like a big economic crisis, and if you start to investigate about after that time, a lot of civil rights start to be sanctioned by the Congress. I think that maybe because the people were so sad. I mean, I'm 22, so I don't really going to give you a big analysis. It's like what I feel as a citizen. It's like the people were so sad. We don't have money. Okay, start with the civil rights. How people can be more happy. I think that was like an important point to result about the LGBT the LGBT advancements of the rights, because it's very strange that at the same time that we have a crisis, the legislature of Buenos Aires was sanctioned a law that permits homosexual people contain the same rights as heterosexual people. This is one point, and I think that it's because, I don't know, our constitution say and speak about the freedom and the liberty, and I think we are working on that way.
Thank you. Yes.
On LGBT issues, there are other rights that we are not working, like press liberty or press freedom.
You want to get that in. Make sure you. Yes.
I'm John Craig. I live in Arlington. I do some independent internet radio broadcasts on LGBT issues and rights, including in healthcare. I've been working in addictions treatments, nicotine especially, the sky-high rates of addiction in the LGBT community, so it's a big health issue. I just wanted to address the issue of political violence against civil rights leaders, because you've experienced this. And I really want to say I admire your courage. I think a lot of us here who are older, and we've been through a lot of violence in this country, I'll speak to that in a moment, really admire your courage here. I grew up in Georgia. I went to a conservative, Christian boys' school. The gay rights issue at that time in the 60s wasn't even an issue. No one was debating it either way. It wasn't even mentioned. It was a rough time. Martin Luther King was, of course, from Atlanta, where I grew up. So everyone was saying, will he be assassinated? Will he be murdered? And he was when I was young. So I had that fixed in my head. I went off to Yale. I couldn't come out there. I couldn't figure out how to come out. I went out to California and ended up on Castro Street. By pure coincidence, this is in the 70s, I actually lived in the building by coincidence that Harvey Milk lived in.
Oh, wow.
So
I went to see her.
I passed his camera shop every day. I didn't know a lot about him. But it was an amazing time in San Francisco. At that time was probably like Buenos Aires today, in some ways. And it was a leader. You could go there. You could be free on the street.
It's beautiful.
It was amazing, and you just couldn't believe it was going on. And about a couple of years after I moved in that building, I was gone, but he was murdered.
Yeah.
And so I had been close to the murder of King in my hometown of Atlanta, and very close to the murder of
Harvey.
So I think a lot about this, and sometimes I have friends who say, if you're going to speak out on these things, it's America, everything's okay today. And maybe in our country, things are farther down the road. But what I'm thinking, and the question for you, Pedro, is, having experienced that violent attack, if we are planning to help civil rights leaders in the Caribbean or around the world, including young leaders, from your experience, what kinds of cautions, or how should we train these young leaders in terms of being cautious? I mean, do you have ideas about that? I'm involved with leadership training sometimes. It seems like those issues should be discussed. What are the threats against possibly?
¿Cuáles son las amenazas?
Okay, understand.
Cada vez daría
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. First of all, I thanks. And I want to share that I'm a brother of 10 brothers, and my fathers were from Opus Dei, and I went to a boy Catholic school too. So I know what you're talking about. Now my fathers are not more from Opus Dei, the God. But what I think about the civil rights leaders, how to help them on the advertisement, is like you just have to fight. Harvey Milk was murdered, but he got a lot of goals. He gave his life. But I think that when I finished high school and in Argentina, my idea was to study fashion designer because I say I will not going to can get on politics. But I wrote a biography about Mandela, and when I finished that book, I say if he can, everybody can. In some places, sometimes you have to give your life. In some places, you don't have to give your life, but you have to give all your time. For example, I think that advertisement is like, no, we don't have to make advertisements. We just have to say, go on, fight for your rights. Sometimes you can get goals and results more easy, and sometimes it's going to be more difficult. I don't know, it's how I feel about that. Because I don't know, maybe it's not in the same level. But for example, my team and I, we spend a lot of hours working on these issues, and sometimes it's like you have to choose between like I don't know, spending the birthday of your sister in your house, or stay in the office working Saturday, Monday, and I don't know. I lost my boyfriend 2 months ago, so he's my ex-boyfriend. That's not my boyfriend. He's still being my boyfriend, and it's like it's work, and it's like I don't know. I don't think that we don't have to make advertisements. It's like go on and make more effort, and sometimes you get the goals more easy, but when it's more difficult, I think that it's more interesting. We are getting goals in the most conservative party in Argentina. The most conservative party in Argentina that here is in the States is like in the middle. We are not like the Republicans.
Unfortunately, our time is ending. Why don't I give Scott and Carlos, if they want to give a final word, is there anything that you want to...
I don't have anything other than to also thank Pedro for his courage to continue the good work, and please, all of you should feel free to reach out to our embassies wherever you might be doing this work, Jamaica, Argentine, because our officers are under instructions to be focusing on these issues and working with individuals like you, organizations like yours to help advance your rights. Thank you.
Carlos?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think regarding your question about why Argentina, I think, there is this sense, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and most of Latin American countries, but they really had a very hard time during the 70s. And I think that the dirty war and the repression played a key role during those years, that after, when democracy came back, so to speak, I think also there was kind of a rebirth of human rights in general. So I think there is this sense that human rights should be respected no matter what, including, I think, sexual orientation and rights based on your sexual orientation and gender identity. And we have seen that in Uruguay too. Chile is going to the same path. I think it has to deal with that. That people lived under repression for a long time and they were tired of it.
Yeah.
One case I wanted to ask, and just to conclude, and maybe ask Carlos and Pedro, is Cuba, which has changed a lot. A specialist on Cuba told me recently that the only time he recalls that Fidel Castro admitted he was wrong in his life was the way his treatment of gay people and homosexuals, that he's publicly said that this was a mistake that he made, that this was wrong, which is not, Fidel Castro doesn't acknowledge a lot of mistakes. He's not known for that. And yet this is, if you go back in the last 50 years, 60 years, the one time when he acknowledged it was precisely on this issue. Do you have any Do you follow Cuba, Carlos, and do you have any thoughts about Cuba? Because there seems to
Do we
be
have
a...
time?
In 2 words. Huh?
You want to start or?
Anything, and then we'll...
Well, yes. Well, yeah.
I don't want to...
No, don't worry.
I didn't mean to open up a whole...
No, don't worry.
I just wanted to get it
I
out
think
there.
there are two good things. One is, well, Cuba has always praised that they're being a beacon on LGBTI rights, thanks to the NSX. And I'm not gonna mention about the NSX and what they have been doing in Cuba. But the truth is that we are working with independent activists, LGBTI activists, and one of these LGBT activists is actually right now in Poland in a training, and Janis, that we know is in Poland right now. But I think the fact that Cuba lifted travel restrictions in January this year has been opening a door for activists, not only on LGBT issues, but on a lot of issues, to interact with other activists from Latin America. So for instance, we've been bringing LGBTI activists from Cuba to meet with Afro-Colombian LGBTI activists and Afro-Brazilian LGBT activists. And they're like, what is this? As you can imagine. He's like, where were we? And obviously, like ideally we'll be also to get in touch with the Argentinians, but Argentina is so expensive because it's so it's farther south, right? But the whole idea is that they can interact, and they face so many issues and so many problems over there.
No, en Cuba, Fidel reconoció que cometió un error en su trato de esto. Entonces, ¿cómo ves el caso de Cuba en términos de los avances, etcétera?
Okay, I have a particular opinion about Cuba. It's like, I don't care their advancements in the LGBT rights. I think that they have to give freedom, and from freedom start to work. If the government don't give the freedom to the people that they need to live, not to work, to live, first freedom and live, then freedom and work. That's my opinion about Cuba, and it's like, I don't know. I feel like strange, like working for LGBT rights in Cuba and the freedom, but they are not so freedom. It's like, no, give us the freedom and then we work as we went to work. I think that.
Great. I think that's clear. No ambiguity there. Pedro, I want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely terrific.